Hey everyone, welcome to part 12 of the Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video we will look at how to start a battle when the player walks through the grass, and also how to end the battle and go back to the free roam state once one of the Pokemon faints. So before we start the video, I just want to let you guys know that I've started a Patreon page, and you can help me continue making the series by supporting me in Patreon. And you'll also get some cool rewards like an exclusive Patreon feed where you can ask me any questions you have, access to script files which you can use as a reference while following along. And I'll also be planning the next videos in the series based on what my Patreons want to see. So if you think you have got some value from the series, and if you can also afford it, please consider becoming a Patreon and support me in this journey. So let's get started. So first let's look at a problem that we have right now. So if I drag my game window here, and in the scene window I want to see my player, and if we test the game, you can see that our players are also moving when I try to select an action. So this is because both our player controller and battle system has an update function in which they are trying to get the input and do something. So in order to fix this, we are going to use a state design pattern. So we are going to have a game controller inside which we'll store the game state, and depending upon the state, we will give the control to either the player controller or the battle system. So both of them can't have the control at the same time. So in the scripts, I'll create a new script called the game controller. And inside the game controller, we need a way to store the game state. So I'll create an enum for that. I'll name the two states as FreeRoam and Battle. So now inside our game controller, we can create a reference of the game state. And in the update function, if the state is free roam, then we'll give the control to the player controller, and otherwise if the state is equal to battle, then we'll give the control to the battle system. So now I need reference to both player controller and battle system. So first I'll create one for the player controller, and then for the battle system. So if we go inside the player controller, you can see that we have an update function. So I'll change the name of this function from update to handle update so that it won't be called automatically by Unity, and we can call this from inside the game controller. And we also have to make it public. So similarly in the battle system, I'll change update to handle update, and I'll make it public. So if the game state is free roam, I'll call player controller.handle update, and if it's battle, I'll call battle system.handle update. So initially the game is going to be in the free roam state since this is the first state in our enum. So in the scene, we will disable the battle system and enable our main camera. So when the game starts, we will be in the free roam state. And now when the player walks through the grass, we need to start a battle. So if you look inside our player controller script, we have already written the logic that will create random encounters with wild Pokemon. We did this in part 4 of the series. So instead of just printing this, we should start the battle by going into the battle state when this happens. So how do we tell the game controller that we need to go to the battle state? So one way is we can grab a reference to the game controller in the player controller and just call a function. But the problem with this is we already have a reference of the player controller inside the game controller. So if we create a reference back to it, then this will create a circular dependency which can cause a lot of problems, and which is something that we want to avoid. So instead we are going to use the observer design pattern to solve this. So inside our player controller, we will create an event and the game controller will subscribe to that event, and whenever there's an encounter we'll just invoke that event, and any other game objects that are subscribed to that event will be notified that it happened. So in the player controller I'll create an event called onEncountered. So in order to use action, we need to import the system namespace, and I'll name this event onEncountered. And finally, in the check for encounters, we need to call our event instead of just printing this. So we have an error here in the random. So this is because both Unity engine and our system namespace has a random class. And since we just imported the system namespace, now this code doesn't know which random class we are referring to. So here I'll just say Unity engine dot random. All right. And now in the game controller, in the start function, we'll subscribe to the event that we created, and we'll call a function called start battle when this event is fired. So let's create that function now. So inside our start battle function, first we need to set the state to GameState.battle, and then we need to enable the battle system game object because initially it is disabled. So I'll say battle system.gameObject.setActive true. So this will enable the game object to which the battle system script is attached. And finally, we need to disable the main camera, which is the camera of our world, so that we don't have two cameras active at the same time. So I'll grab a reference to the main camera, and I'll just call this world camera. And here I'll just disable it. So now we'll go to Unity and create a new game object to hold the game controller script. And I'll attach the game controller script to it and assign the player controller, the battle system, and the main camera. And let me just make the main camera a child object of the player so that it will move along with the player, and we'll change the X and Y position to 0. So if we test the game now, and if we walk through the grass, you can see that it starts a battle. And the player doesn't move when we try to select an action. But one thing you can note is that the player is actually being animated when this happens. So this is because we are not calling handle update anymore once the battle starts. So the is moving is not set to false. So let's set that just before starting the battle, and it will solve that issue. Okay, so now we need to end the battle when one of the Pokemon faints, and we need to go back to the free roam state. So in our battle system, we'll create an event called onBattleOver. I can use the shortcut control dot to quickly import the missing namespaces, and I'll call this event onBattleOver. And to this action, we will also add a Boolean parameter so that we can let the game controller know whether the player won the battle or lost the battle. So inside perform player move coroutine, if the enemy faints, then first we'll wait for 2 seconds, and then we'll call the onBattleOver event and pass true to it, because the enemy Pokemon is the one that fainted and player won the battle. And in case of the enemy move, if the player Pokemon fainted, I'll do the same thing, but I'll pass false to indicate that the player is the one who lost. So now in the game controller, let's subscribe to this event. and we'll call a function called end battle, and let's create the end battle function. So this function will take a boolean which will specify if the battle was won or lost. And inside this function, first we'll set the state back to free roam, and then we'll disable the battle system, and finally we will enable our world camera. So if we test the game now, so you can see that when the battle starts, the player is not in the animated state anymore. Okay, so if I use a move, alright, so I had changed the level of Bulbasaur to 50 earlier just for testing. So let me change that back, otherwise we won't be able to beat him. So I'll change the level back to 5. So let me just place the game back here, and I'll select maximize on play. And now if we test the game, I can walk through the grass and start a battle. And if I try to kill the enemy Pokemon, you can see that once it faints, we'll wait for 2 seconds and then go back to our free roam state. But there is one more issue that we need to address. So if we start another battle, you can see that it continues our previous battle instead of starting a new one. So let's fix that. Inside the battle system, right now we are calling the setup battle coroutine from the start. So it will only be called once. So we need to be able to call this whenever we start a new battle from the game controller. So I'll rename this function as start battle, make it public, and call this inside our start battle function in the game controller. And there is another issue right now in our battle unit. At the end of the battle, we'll play the faint animation. So this will change the alpha of our image to 0 to make it invisible. So in the setup function, we need to reset the color of our image. So to do that, I'll set image.color to the original color. So now if we test the game, let me end this battle quickly. And we should go back to our free roaming scene. And you can see that when I start a new battle, we don't have that issue anymore. It starts an entirely new battle. So I'll stop the video here. If you think this video is helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like on the video. That'll really help me a lot. And I'll see you in the next video.